You're listening to Business Buzz, the official podcast of King's Business Club, the largest business and finance society in London.
Hi everyone, and welcome to this episode of Business Buzz, the podcast which aims to aid the development of the great minds that will shape the future of the world we live in. I'm Alex, and today I'm joined by serial entrepreneur and LSE graduate Joel Alexander. Joel is a co-founder and CEO at CrowdPad, a social crowdfunding app, and is also the co-founder of ReShape, a Gen Z consulting business aimed at helping SMEs face strategic challenges. Additionally, Joel was selected as a Forbes Under 30 scholar to represent the London School of Economics and Political Science in Detroit, Michigan, as one of only 1,000 most innovative and entrepreneurial future leaders worldwide. Joel was one of 3 students selected from the UK, so a hugely honourable achievement. I am delighted to welcome you, Joel, to share your story with us here at King's Business Club and to our wider audience.
Wow, thanks, Alex, for that very undeserving introduction. I feel like that was a long one, but I mean, I think first of all, hello to my fellow neighbors across the street at King's Business School. How are you guys doing? And yeah, I'm just really excited to chat and sort of share any insights that I can to add value to you as much as possible.
Yeah, great. We're really excited to have you, and I'm sure both myself and our listeners will learn a lot from this. So as you know, I've been following you on LinkedIn and Twitter for some time now. And I always feel engaged in your content, whether it's a crowdfunding update or job opportunities for your fellow students. But what I'd like to hear some more from you on are your current ventures, including any I might have missed, and how you came up with these ideas.
Yeah, this is not going to be very exciting. Few minutes, I'm afraid. So, I'll start with ReShape because that was last year in June. And essentially what was happening was around the world, we had the pandemic sort of devastating SMEs and businesses all over the place. And the place I was in at the time forecasted that something like 65 or 70% of the SMEs out there were at risk of bankruptcy within the next 6 months. And seeing that sort of title and headline made me go like, this is my home. I can't let the businesses that I've grown up with fail. And whilst I had zero consulting expertise and I wasn't a pro in any of that sort of stuff, I did know quite a few friends of mine who were into the space. So I just reached out to them, sort of asked them, what do you guys feel about this sort of a concept? They were on board. We came together, and then I basically reached out to about 20 other students like me to ask if they'd be willing to sort of consult on ventures that needed our support. And then I also reached out to 5 business owners to ask if they would actually need our support, because market validation and all of that is very nice and fancy, but the question is at what pace can you do that and how quickly can you do that, especially when businesses are in dire need. So it was very quick, that whole process. We scaled from a team of 5 consultants or 5 co-founders or whatever it was at the time to a team of 210 around the world essentially. And that scale was achieved because, a lot of the internships globally were canceled. I don't know if you remember around that summertime last year because of COVID. And we just had such a sheer volume of applications. I would say anywhere even close to the 1,000 plus mark. And that's insane, I would say. So we eventually supported about 40 companies and we supported with go-to-market, branding, marketing, and a bunch of other things, digital transformation, revenue recovery, you name it. So we've been able to do it. And now ReShape is on a different path, I would say. It's evolving a little bit, but more on that soon, I would say. As for CrowdPad, I was in the shower and then I was I thought about the social crowdfunding thing, and then we sort of had quite a lot of hiccups in between, but then eventually sort of scrapped the social crowdfunding piece actually. So that's something that I've not announced on the main sort of pages, I guess. I've just briefly mentioned that we're doing crypto startup. But what we realized was if we did a social crowdfunding app, and by that I mean Tinder plus TikTok for crowdfunding. So you swipe right and left on founders that you like and don't like, and then you invest in them. whilst that's like a significant like UX improvement, I would say I don't think that we could have achieved what we set out to achieve, purely because if we raised a pre-seed round of, let's say, £150,000, £100,000 would go towards legal and compliance kind of work, essentially, where you need to get those approvals from the FCA and things like that. And the other £50,000 that we'd finally have left over would be needed to sort of prove the concept, which is not exactly the most efficient use of capital. And therefore, we've sort of now pivoted into this tokenized social media for startups kind of a thing. And that's still something that's developing, and we're in the accelerator with LSE at the moment, where we won about £5,000 in cash funding and also £15,000 in credits for various services. But yeah, we've had the pivot at the start of this accelerator essentially, and are just going strong right now and essentially building up momentum towards building this crypto startup. And that's not something I would have said when I sort of entered university in 2017. So yeah.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. That's really interesting to hear. The journey really, and how you came up with these ideas. One thing you mentioned there was the entrepreneurship wing within LSE, and at King's we also have an entrepreneurship institute with similar schemes. So I'd like to hear a little bit more about that, because I know our listeners will be really interested in hearing about sort of how you succeeded and how you think you succeeded to get that crowdfunding. I think that would be interesting.
In terms of getting into the sort of accelerator, essentially.
Yeah.
So I mean, we were up against, I think, over 110 businesses or something like that as competition, and we were one of the 12 that went to progress to the accelerator cohort. So I would say it's a fair amount of competition, and we've done fairly well. The reasons for success, that's not really something I've had to think a lot about, to be honest. It's just more so, I mean, when you're passionate enough about an idea and you've sort of done businesses before or worked with organizations who have the startup culture before, you kind of know that you need to iron out the problems, like, why is this a need of the hour kind of a thing, and be able to justify that in the most concise manner. I think we would be able to do that effectively, and at the same time provide a solution for that which actually addresses the problem. And I think oftentimes we only see startups that produce like UX enhancements and like UX improvements, which is something that we were doing before. But now I think we're like fundamentally shaping an entire new ecosystem with like decentralized social media and stuff like that. That's like that's industry shaping stuff. So I think it's a unique journey, and it's possibly one of the reasons why they saw potential in us. And also we had a strong team, and I think that's the most important piece of this all. It's not enough to have a great idea. In fact, I feel like the idea changes like 25,000 times before, like you guys actually settle on something every day. Like if you missed a week meeting, you've probably missed an improvement or a change in the idea. That's because that's just how early stage startups work. But then with a great team, my CTO, for instance, she did her placement year at IBM, and now she's in her final year of university. My lead developer is, super into blockchain and is also in his final year of like a CS degree. And my branding and UX person is, went through for like TikTok brand strategy and things like that into the final rounds of that. So overall, a very, very strong, well-rounded team, essentially. I think that's really important. And just communicating with them well. I don't really hold back a lot. Like I'm extremely transparent. I over communicate. I think those are like extremely important in early stages, because otherwise it's like, oh, what is he doing right now? Like, what is she doing right now? Are the wheels moving? Because otherwise, things like, in startups, essentially, you find that if you're not moving forward, you're really moving backwards. And that's just something that's not great for businesses.
Yeah, that's interesting. Obviously, a well-rounded team, and I've experienced this just with uni projects. And sometimes if communication isn't constant, and I guess over communicating, you can fall behind, and as you said, you can take a step backwards.
On the team piece, I'm so sorry to interrupt you. I just want to say one thing, and I think that this is super, super important, right? It's very easy to get carried away by brand names on people's profiles. I would say the way we onboarded our lead developer was actually we set him out on a 2-week task. or 2 to 3 week tasks. He had to sort of code an app in Flutter and things like that, which essentially means that he can code code an app in terms of like Android and iOS as well. That's what that it's just a great tool to have. And we just want to see if this person could sort of live up to what he said he could do, kind of a thing. And we had multiple candidates at the time doing the same thing, and we saw who came through. And rather than just sort of looking at which university they went to, what degree they did, and all this kind of stuff, because in reality, it doesn't matter. Like you can have someone who does like a significant big bulge bracket sort of bank kind of internship and know nothing about sort of finance really. So that's just what I wanted to say on the team.
Yeah, and that actually answered my next question, which was, did you find your co-founders and your team at uni or beyond, and sort of how did you reach out to them and find these people?
Yeah, I think that the thing about LSE is that we aren't as interdisciplinary as you'd like. We don't have sort of a science wing, like we don't have a computer science wing or anything like that. So you don't have a lot of technical talent out there. You would really have to hunt for them. My CTO and co-founder, she's actually sort of my friend from high school, essentially. And we studied together in high school, did MUNs and things like that. And then now, obviously, she was in university doing this as well, like, doing a CS major. So I knew of that. And then essentially you just went from there because it's someone you've worked with, someone you trust. And I think that's a good, recipe to begin with. But I do think that it's extremely hard. Like the other two people, though, for instance, like Harman and Sham actually goes to King's. So he's the president of I believe it was the London Consulting Group or something along those lines. But then he was also the founder of Pally Hill Group, which I'm not sure you're familiar with. But they did a similar consulting. Yeah, they did a similar consulting stint, like ReShape. And yeah, so I knew him from that, like from the social media, from the LinkedIn stuff. And then we just started following each other and like, supporting each other's sort of entrepreneurial ventures and like, built that relationship up. It wasn't so much instant. And my lead developer actually came from a mutual friend, like one of my classmates at LSE, recommended him to me. And like, there's got to be something. I feel like if you're hiring straight off the internet, I mean, I'm sure it happens at big companies, but then like, at tiny startups, it makes a huge difference, could make or break the dream. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. So obviously you started these businesses while studying at university, right? So, my first thought is how did you manage to do this with studies? Did you have a very specific time schedule? Did you use productivity apps? What was your sort of, how did you manage to do this essentially?
Yeah, I think it was extremely challenging at university because I'll just give you an example. So I think we got into the accelerator about April or May time, I think. And I sort of messaged 3 or 4 of my professors going like, hey, I'm like one of the few entrepreneurs in your LSE accounting sort of cohort. And like, just letting you know, we got into this accelerator and I'm super excited about it. And they were all like, congratulations, Joel, but don't forget to study for your exams. So like, they've known me to be this guy that juggles a lot of stuff. But then I would say in terms of time management, for me, routine was one of the most important things in sort of juggling everything. I would say on most days, and this is not like a meme or anything like that, I found myself getting up anywhere between 5 and 7 a.m. Like that's my start and go on a run kind of a thing. And then like, get my head in the right mindset essentially for the day. And then, get started essentially and have a cutoff time at approximately about 7, 8 p.m. so that, you just have that breathing room to like socialize, meet with friends. The balance is really important. But sometimes it can be extremely annoying because like, obviously people at uni, they go super late into the night in terms of like socializing and things like that. And it's amazing, of course. And I don't think anyone should do what I did at uni, like, because it's not the most like, because it's extremely hard to, when you look back at your time at uni, you have to sort of think about like, what are the different experiences that you had? And for me, I find these extremely rewarding. Like I did a nonprofit with Project Access. I did like ReShape. I did CrowdPad and all this kind of stuff. So I'm extremely happy and I'm extremely satisfied. I made the right kind of friends, I would say, got to socialize enough. But I don't think that, everyone in my position would be able to sort of do the same kind of things. They'll have to prioritize or give up something. I feel like, and I've had to, I would say, cut down on like, I mean, you have like some really good friendships that you really need to maintain, and that's something I did. But I would say I've had to sort of like, sort of step back from a lot of those.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's absolutely it makes sense to me, and I think the main thing that I'm seeing from you, and I can see it by speaking to you now, is you seem driven in your ventures, and you're clearly passionate. The way you started ReShape to help businesses that you didn't want to see fail, I think that's fantastic, and a lot of I even saw a tweet from you that mentioned a statistic of Gen Z that wanted to be entrepreneurs, myself included. It seems to be the new age of starting businesses and side hustles. This is what we want to do now. This is the way the future will become. But at the same time, you still have to have that passion in order to be successful. And that's something that I would probably attribute to you being able to do this while at uni. Just as a more detailed technical aspect, did you by any chance use any productivity app that might have helped you? Or did it was just your drive and sort of not sacrifice, but prioritizing, I guess?
I would say it's pretty old school in that sense. Like, no apps or anything like that around that. Perhaps like, using something like that might have helped. But I think that real discipline comes from within, and like, you can try and sort of train yourself to get that discipline, I guess, through apps and things like that. But I think it really takes. So for me, the sort of inflection point was when I realized that, I didn't want to just like, become a banker and like, just make money. And like, you can literally, if you're going into investment banking right now, or you're going to consulting, you can literally plot your life out. Like I'm telling you, there are very few instances of coming from such a privileged education background and then going into like such a prestigious, like, career pathway or whatever it is, and then sort of thinking that you would fall off the wagon somewhere, like massively. You would always be able to sort of plot that out. I think that's such a boring way to live life. And also,
I agree.
like,
I completely agree.
Yeah, and sort of it's like also you want to be able to impact more than yourself. Like it has to be more than just about your bank account. I think that you have to be able to sort of impact the lives of more than yourself, because like surely that there's more to life than just like, building your personal wealth and like, just like living for yourself. And I don't believe in that. It's more of a service mentality, I think, for me. So yeah, I don't know, sorry, went into a bit of a segue with that one. What do you, so you mentioned that obviously, the 61% of entrepreneurs, like 61% of Gen Z want to be entrepreneurs thing. What are you working on? This is your moment to shameless plug, Alex.
Yeah. Well, I've got multiple ideas where music, nutrition, all sorts of different things. I've wanted to start my own radio show. They're very different from yours. I know you're very sort of driven by helping people, and so am I. But I also look at things that I enjoy, and I want to find a way to monetize, not necessarily to monetize them, but to turn them into businesses, into something that I can put, a stamp on. So nutrition, I want to be able to share recipes with people. I want to be able to give diet plans. I want to be able to help people. Not obviously like a dietitian, but that sort of some Instagram, social media. These are things that I come up with. And then music. I want to make my own music. With the podcasts, I like to edit.
What do you play?
Well, I play guitar, but my main thing is electronic stuff. So, I'm into that dance music and house and everything. Yeah, but these are ideas, but and this is why it's so interesting to speak to you, because it's sort of letting me realize that you don't need to wait, and you can do things, and as long as you have the passion, and as you said, you create a good team around you to help you. You can do things, and that's great. And you've given me some advice today. Yeah, you go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. No, let me sort of interject in that. I would say, okay, on the YouTube stuff, or like, becoming more of a social media sharing content, creating content kind of thing. Like that's extremely like a popular sort of pathway right now. And I think it's about consistency in that sense, right? I don't think anyone's going to blow up on like day one without some sort of like unfair advantages or whatever, but it's about using the ones that you have to your strength. So for me, I know that I've built up like, all those sort of titles and things like that you mentioned in the beginning. For me, it means virtually nothing. Like as in on the Forbes thing and all of that stuff, like I don't really care about all of that anymore. But people outside do see it as some sort of like stamp of like approval, stamp of credibility, or whatever it is. And basically, it's our job to sort of leverage that into opportunities, I think. So, and that's how I would say that and being young as well, leveraging that fact, because older people who are probably more experienced and things like that are willing to give you advice because like you're young and they see a little bit of themselves in you trying to hack their way through career pathways and things like that. So they will sort of give you advice, but you got to make sure that you reach out, because I feel like sometimes we think that people are out of our reach. But let's see, I run this little YouTube channel, and we do a segment called Try with Startup CEOs, right? So just yesterday I put out an episode where I spoke to this guy who raised $20 million in a seed round, which is one of the largest ever in Middle East history. And think about it, I just graduated from LSE. Technically speaking, should a 22-year-old have access to someone like that? I don't know. You know what I mean? So it's just about, I think, like being scrappy about those kind of things and not being afraid to try. I think that's the biggest mistake that people make. Like they think that, like what's the worst that can happen, right? Like, people are going to say no. People are going to, not accept an invitation. But so what? If they don't, the next person will. Like, I think that that's the mentality you have to go in with. And I've heard no's before, but increasingly my conversion rate of like yes to no and all that kind of stuff is, very favorable on my side, I would say. So yeah, just sort of hacking away at it and doing it in a non-superficial way. I feel like it's super important. Like, I think people see through bullshit. Like, people can see that, like, if you are sort of just in it to get like, oh, for instance, let's say come on my YouTube channel so that I can talk to you, whatever. And that's the first point of interaction. You might not get a positive response from someone who is busy building like a big company or whatever. But if you've interacted with them in some way, shape, or form before, then it is likely that you might get a response. And your engagement prior to that is essentially what sets the base for for them coming onto your show and things like that. Because like otherwise they have no reason, right? Like building genuine relationships and things like that with professionals is super important.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that and say that in my first year of uni, I thought all I needed was, being an exceptional academic. But really, I know we've had difficulty meeting people during COVID. I haven't even been in London to study this year. But what I've come to realize now is that building a network and maintaining a network of good people, of useful people, of interesting people to help you, with your ventures and just to create relationships with is really important. And that can really get your foot in the door and really get you those yeses. And I assume that's what you're saying. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's brilliant. So you've given so much advice to us in these past 25 minutes. I was just hoping maybe if we could have two key tips that we could use, that we could take away from this as young entrepreneurs, more amateur entrepreneurs. How can we leverage this information? How can we use what you've said today?
Yeah. Number one, do something about it. I would say that's the first step, right? Like I actually don't just listen, like actively use it to do something meaningful, right? Like I think that's what there's so much like, advice out there, so many people giving advice. But how many people are using it, or how many people are using it to sort of just feel good and then like, go back to their normal lives, right? I think it's not easy though. I think, people need to sort of have that pause that is generated from catalyst events and like, to sort of make them realize why something is important or why something is not important. So my two key takeaways in that sense, I would say, number one, digital leverage is huge. I would say that building a social media presence and stuff like that is not like a wannabe kind of a thing. It's more so as entrepreneurs, you don't have any credibility, especially straight out of university, realistically speaking. You have your university stamp, you have a bunch of cute societies you've been a part of, and that's about it. Like, where is the rest of your credibility, right? So you don't have years of industry experience and things like that. But what you can have is something like this, sort of a digital presence, which can be in the form of a YouTube channel, which can be in the form of like, content creating on LinkedIn or whatever it is. People need to know how you're thinking, because in the early stages, people are not investing in ideas, people are investing in people. And if they see the passion, the drive, the ability to hack their way through to significant levels of people, then there's something there. And number two, I would say, is just like, it's very difficult to keep going. I think that in entrepreneurship, in startups and things like that, it's so easy to quit. Like, and there's so many reasons to quit and very few reasons to keep going. Because realistically, what is my status quo right now? I'm working a part-time gig at the same time. I'm trying to get my company to a pre-seed stage, kind of startup, right? And that's not the easiest things in the world. And sometimes you're just like, oh, but I could be making like 4,500, 5,500 sort of pounds a month. Why am I doing this? Instead of like, just struggling, trying to be scrappy, struggling and like, oh shoot, okay, cool. Next month I have to pay rent. So I have to make sure I keep this part-time gig until then. Like, you know what I mean? So just ensuring that you don't quit and just constantly sort of getting up from setbacks and taking it all in a positive stride, I think is so important. And it's difficult to see it in the moment, but like, if you sort of let it sit and sleep on it, things get better. So
Yeah. Well, what a fantastic way to end this episode. I want to thank you again for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you with us and to have you on Business Buzz with King's Business Club. I know I've learned a lot from you today, and I'm sure the other students and young people who listen to this will also learn a lot from this. You're welcome back anytime, and it's been a pleasure. So thanks again.
Thank you, Alex, and thank you to everyone who made it till this minute of the podcast.